Hello, Dinesh. Welcome to the Berkeley of the South, as it's called. I would like to know your thoughts on who and what is behind the strategy of mass third world immigration into the first world, and how do you think that will impact the issues of fascism and racism?
It is one of the most common indictments against Trump that he's a racist because he hates immigrants. But notice that Trump's line is not a racial one. It's between the legal and the illegal immigrant. Notice that most immigrants who come to America legally are non-white, like me. Most immigrants today come from Asia, Africa, and South America. Now, Trump has called for more skilled immigrants. Canada does it, Australia does it. But Trump has never said, or even implied, you know what, I want more immigrants from New Zealand and Iceland and no more immigrants from Barbados or Bombay. No, not only has he not said that, in a public exchange with Bannon, Trump said to Bannon, if we got an Indian guy working in a Silicon Valley company and his visa expires, Trump goes, we don't want to send that guy home. He's an asset to the United States. And Bannon looked at him sort of askance. Bannon may not have agreed, but that was Trump's view. Trump's view was, we got to figure out a way to keep that guy because he's an asset to the United States of America. So just saying that this is, now who's behind the strategy? I mean, I think what's particularly disheartening is to look at the media. I look at the New York Times, you know, they'll say something like, Trump attacks immigrants. They're deliberately conflating the legal and the illegal. I mean, think about it. An illegal alien is not an immigrant. Because an immigrant, by definition, is somebody who has come through a legal process and been accepted into the social compact. If you sneak across the border, you're not an immigrant. You're a lawbreaker.
Do you think the UN has a role in that mass immigration to the first world?
Ma'am, in fairness, if you don't mind, I want to go on because I know not everyone's going to get a chance. And I just want to be able to keep it moving. If you don't mind, I just want to keep going.
The time.
Good afternoon. Coming to college, I was fairly liberal, but when I got here, I started to academically and intellectually engage in alternative viewpoints, and I've become more conservative since then. I've found great intellectual stimulation in engaging in these other viewpoints, and on a college campus, I feel like a lot of kids are neglected in their ability to look into these other viewpoints without being shot down as racist or something else, which really detracts from the intellectual integrity of the argument. What are your thoughts on talking about these issues with other students, trying to find this truth that we can all hold and see where we differ in our views? I guess my question is, what are your thoughts on how we can approach that issue a little bit better as opposed to polarizing things and just butting heads and not getting anywhere?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that a lot of the blame for the way that the debate has been squelched on campus must be laid straight at the feet of the administration and the faculty. It does. Because they run the place. They're the adults around here. If there are young people who are scared to speak out, it's their job to protect you, you know, and they don't. And so what you have is a situation with, I mean, my own example is really, a lot of times my talk on a campus may be the only conservative presentation of a coherent form that students hear in 4 years of being in college. And yet, when my posters go up, people start pulling them down, right? Now think about this. I mean, literally, if you tried to do this to the left, you'd have CBS News on the campus. It would be a CBS 60-minute special. And if the Republicans did to Obama what they do to Trump, let's say that 100 Republicans said, we're not showing up at the inauguration. Even if Trump talks well about America, America's back, dead silence. Give him a dirty look or walk out. This would be apoplexy. And so these double standards have become entrenched. So unfortunately, by tragic necessity, it's your mission, students' mission, to bear this burden and have to fight this battle. The good news is you can fight it. Be creative, use social media. I love the strategy of the students here. You pull one D'Souza poster down, 2 more go on up. You know, it's a very proactive strategy. I like it. Be imaginative and be creative, but think about it. It's not ultimately about a political cause at all. It's ultimately about protecting your own integrity, to get valid information, to be able to subject it to truth. You know, notice, for example, I mean, I'll draw protesters, but very few of them actually come into the room. You know why? Because if they did, they would realize that even if they disagreed with me, that their effort to demonize me fails. I might be wrong about Nixon Southern Strike. I might have miscounted the Dixiecrats who became, but those are empirical arguments among reasonable people, and if you show it to me, I'm a public figure, I'd have to take it back. So I'm putting my ideas out there. It's the fact that my ideas are effective that actually makes me more dangerous. And so my advice to you, become more dangerous. Become a very dangerous American. That's the way to go. Thank you all.
Hey, I have a question. You mentioned that the sort of racist attitudes towards drugs began in the 90s under the Clintons, right?
Right.
Okay, that's patently false. We can point to the early 1900s when marijuana first came over the border from Mexico. All of the rhetoric surrounding the illegalization of marijuana was incredibly racist, particularly against Mexican, Latinos, and black people, claiming that it would essentially stir people into a Negro frenzy, if you will, I believe is one of the terms used. So for someone claiming the big lie, why did you tell this lie in your speech to promote your ideology?
Well, the context of my remarks was not a history of immigration. It was the 60s. Nixon ran first for president in 1968. He won in 68. He was reelected in 72. The question in front of us was this: is it a fact that when Richard Nixon spoke about drugs in the late 60s and 70s, that was a dog whistle, a code for blacks? And what I'm saying is no. Marijuana from the 60s right to this present day. If you read Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, she argues that marijuana penalties are relatively light because whites use marijuana, and crack penalties have been severe because blacks use crack. So the point I'm trying to make is that no, in the era that we are talking about, which is the Nixonian era to now, the 3 strikes and you're out, the blacks are super predators. These are artifacts of the Clinton era. So, nice try on the history, but not a non sequitur.
Do you want a quick rebuttal?
Yeah.
Quick rebuttal.
You didn't really answer my question, and correct me if I'm wrong, Nixon first ran for president in 1960 against John F. Kennedy.
He did, but lost. Yes, he did. He unsuccessfully ran. But the debate about the big switch and the Nixon Southern strategy obviously doesn't have to do with his losing campaign.
Okay, but anti-marijuana rhetoric in the United States started in the 30s.
One question.
Okay, let's keep going.
I was just going to bring up a quote from Nixon's domestic policy chief, John Elrickman, and he came and said this in an interview in 2016. He said, the Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had 2 enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and the blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. What do you have to say about that?
Hold on, guys. The story of Nixon is very interesting because Nixon is a man who fell into complete disgrace. The people who were around Nixon were in a very awkward position because how could they salvage their careers after what happened to Nixon? Most of them became liberals. They pivoted to the left, they saw the light, and the media was eager to rehabilitate them, and they were eager then to bash Nixon. It's sort of like a James Comey story. James Comey is appointed by a Republican. It then becomes in his interest So now it suddenly occurred to him all kinds of things that happened that emerge in his book, but he never said them before. He never said them to Congress. It is convenient for him to say them now. Now, the reason I say this is because in the historical community, there is a general agreement that the architect of Nixon's Southern strategy is not funny haircut Bob Haldeman. It is Kevin Phillips, the author of The Emerging Republican Majority. That's supposed to be the Bible of Nixon's Southern strategy. Pick up that book and read it. It says on the first page, first of all, Kevin Phillips says, although many people, and he's writing now a kind of a foreword many years later, although many people credit me with the Southern strategy, he goes, Nixon had no knowledge of my book until after the election. I am not proposing a strategy. I'm describing what Nixon actually did. So, what did Nixon actually do? Kevin Phillips tells you. He says Nixon knew. Remember, the base of the Republican Party was in New York and the Northeast and California. Nixon knew that if he uttered one racist statement, he would lose the base of the Republican Party to gain a few southern states. Nixon didn't want to do that. Nixon decided not even to campaign in the Deep South, only in what he called the peripheral or upper South. Nixon campaigned in the cities. He campaigned in Tampa, in Atlanta, in Raleigh, in Houston. He saw a sun belt stretching from Florida to California, which was growing, upwardly mobile, non-racist, entrepreneurial, anti-communist, and Nixon appealed to that. Now, the proof of all this, by the way, is that the Southern strategy, the South really swung into the Republican column, not under Nixon, only under Reagan. And why? It was Reagan's appeal to patriotism, anti-communism, free markets, privatization, anti-abortion, pro-life, school prayer, this whole ensemble of issues. Now, you can read Kevin Cruz's history book. It makes no mention of any of this. Why? It's all too inconvenient, because it gives an alternative explanation for why not the South, not the racist South, the non-racist South defected to Nixon. So, to sum it up, in the 20th century, racism in the South goes like this. It's a declining trajectory. Republican affiliation goes like this. So the two vectors are moving in opposite directions. As you can say that as the South became less racist, it became more Republican.
So my biggest concern is artificial intelligence and machine learning. What role does the Republican Party play in making sure that we avoid the dangers of artificial intelligence? And what is your opinion of how the Donald Trump administration should regulate these advances in technology?
Whoa. Talk about coming from Mars on this one. Look, I'm going to defer that question because, to me, artificial intelligence is part of the ongoing march of technology. In general, when you have new technologies, two things occur. One is there's incredible promise, and the other is that there are some real pitfalls, and in some cases, some real dangers. By and large, technology, in my view, is unstoppable, and so the question is never yes or no. It is how do you steer this technology? Whether it's nuclear technology, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's cloning, how do you steer this technology in such a way that it affirms human values rather than undercutting them? So I'll just leave it at that general statement, partly in the interest of time.